The chandeliers glittered above the ballroom, the string quartet's music swelling as the elite of Beverly Hills gathered for the Davenport Society charity ball. My relatives, dressed in silk and dripping with jewels, circled the room with the confidence of people who had always belonged. They laughed, clinked champagne glasses, and whispered about their next business conquest. And then, the room froze. The doors swung open, and in walked Ethan Beaumont, the billionaire investor my cousin Olivia and my uncle Charles had been chasing for months, desperate for his funding, his approval, his status. But he wasn't here for them. He was here holding keys. My keys. The penthouse they'd tried to strip from me, the one they swore I wasn't sophisticated enough to own, now belonged to him. And when he crossed the room, shaking my hand like an equal, I watched their fake smiles collapse into silence. That moment, the shock, the humiliation on their faces, wasn't where my story began. It was the end of a battle that stretched back months. To understand how I got there, you have to see how my so-called family tried to destroy me, and how I turned their greed into their greatest embarrassment. It all started on a rainy Tuesday in November. I was hunched over spreadsheets at Thompson & Wallace Accounting, where I'd been working since graduating with my finance degree 6 years ago. The office was quiet, just the soft tapping of keyboards and occasional murmur of phone conversations. My life was ordered, predictable, some might say boring, but it was mine. I'd built it myself, without the help of the Monroe family fortune that had boosted every other cousin's career, education, and social standing. My phone vibrated on my desk. Gerald Warner, Grandma Eleanor's attorney. My heart sank. We all knew Grandma had been ill, but the family had been keeping me at arm's length during her final days. Too busy with work to visit, they'd told her, though I'd never said any such thing. Bella, I need you to come to my office this afternoon. It's about your grandmother's will. 3 hours later, I sat stunned in Gerald's wood-paneled office as he adjusted his glasses and repeated the words I couldn't quite process. The penthouse at the Archer on Wilshire Boulevard. Eleanor left it to you. Specifically and solely to you. I remembered that penthouse. As a child, Grandma would sometimes take just me there for city adventures, as she called them. We'd have tea parties on the balcony overlooking Los Angeles, the city sprawled below us like a twinkling blanket. One day, she'd whisper, you'll understand why I'm showing you this place, why it matters to have something that's yours alone. The penthouse was worth millions. More importantly, it was the crown jewel of the, Monroe Holdings, the symbol of their arrival into Los Angeles society decades ago. There must be some mistake, I said, my voice small. Uncle Charles always said that property would go to the family trust. Gerald's eyes softened. Eleanor was very specific, Bella. She left letters explaining everything. He handed me an envelope with my name written in Grandma's elegant script. She said you were the only one who valued the penthouse for what it was, not what it represented. I opened the letter with trembling hands. My dearest Bella, if you're reading this, I've finally gone to join your grandfather. Don't be sad, my darling. I've had a wonderful life. You're holding the deed to the penthouse now. I know this will cause an uproar in the family. They've always seen it as a status symbol, but you saw it as our special place, where we would talk about books and dreams and the shapes we found in the clouds. You've always been different from the rest of them. You value substance over appearance, kindness over influence. While they collected connections, you collected moments. They will tell you that you don't deserve this inheritance. That's how they measure worth, in deserving, in status, in appearance. But I measure worth differently. And you, my quiet, determined granddaughter, are worth more than all their social climbing combined. The penthouse is yours, not to prove anything to them, but to give you the freedom they never wanted you to have. All my love. Grandma Eleanor. I folded the letter, tucking it carefully into my purse. What happens now? Gerald explained the details, the transfer process, the maintenance fees, the staff who kept the place running. It was overwhelming, but beneath my shock, a small flame of something unfamiliar was kindling. Pride, perhaps, or vindication. I decided to visit the penthouse immediately. Taking the private elevator up to the top floor, I felt like an imposter. The doors opened directly into the foyer. Marble floors, soaring ceilings, walls of glass framing the Los Angeles skyline. It was exactly as I remembered, yet somehow more breathtaking. My phone buzzed again. Uncle Charles. News traveled fast in the Monroe family. Bella, we need to talk about this. Situation. Dinner. Tonight. The house. His voice left no room for refusal. I agreed, though my stomach clenched at the thought. The house meant the family. Mansion in Bel Air, where I always felt like an outsider at the massive dining table. That evening, I parked my modest Honda between Aunt Margaret's Mercedes and Olivia's Range Rover. Taking a deep breath, I walked up the imposing steps to the front door. The atmosphere inside was glacial. Uncle Charles, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, stood by the fireplace nursing a scotch. Aunt Margaret, perched on the edge of the sofa, her thin face pinched with disapproval. And Olivia, my cousin, paced the room in her designer dress, shooting daggers at me with her eyes. "There she is," Aunt Margaret said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Our little accountant. Come, darling. Sit down." I took a seat, smoothing my department store dress self-consciously. "Let's not waste time," Uncle Charles said. Eleanor's decision was unexpected, and frankly, inappropriate. "Inappropriate?" I echoed. "The penthouse was meant for the family," Aunt Margaret interjected, "for someone who could use it properly, for entertaining, networking, building the Monroe name." "What your aunt means," Uncle Charles continued, swirling his drink, "is that you're not exactly suited to such a property. An accountant living in a $12 million penthouse, it's absurd." Olivia finally stopped pacing. "Mom and Dad are trying to be nice about this, Bella, but I'll be direct. I need that penthouse. My luxury lifestyle startup is going to revolutionize the industry, but I need the right address, the right image. No investor takes you seriously without the proper backdrop." I stared at my cousin, beautiful, entitled Olivia, who had never held a job for more than 6 months, whose startups changed direction with the fashion seasons. "Grandma left it to me," I said quietly. Uncle Charles set down his glass with a sharp clink. "Bella, be reasonable. We're offering to buy you out at a fair price. You can get a nice little house in the valley. Something more appropriate for your lifestyle. I don't want to sell." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You're not sophisticated enough for that penthouse," Aunt Margaret said, her voice hardening. "You'll be a laughingstock. The help will snicker behind your back. Is that what you want?" "I think what Grandma wanted matters more," I replied, surprising myself with my steadiness. Uncle Charles's face darkened. "This isn't about what Eleanor wanted. This is about what makes sense for this family, for all of us." But I knew, sitting there under their disapproving gazes, that all of us had never included me. The weeks after Grandma's will reading became a masterclass in emotional warfare. The Monroe family deployed their arsenal with military precision. Guilt, manipulation, isolation, and when those failed, outright hostility. It began with daily phone calls. Aunt Margaret's voice would tremble with disappointment. "I just don't understand how you could do this to your cousin, after everything we've done for you." Everything they'd done for me? I'd put myself through college when they'd refused to touch the education fund Grandpa had set up for all the grandchildren. "Not a prudent investment," Uncle Charles had declared when I announced my accounting major instead of something prestigious, like law or medicine. The calls escalated to ambushes. I'd exit my office building to find Olivia waiting, her eyes dramatically red-rimmed. "My investors need to see that I'm serious," she'd plead, clutching my arm as we stood on the sidewalk. "They need to know I have family backing. The penthouse would show them I'm not just playing at business." I'd gently extract myself from her grip. "Maybe focus on the business plan first? I could help you with the financials." She'd recoil as if I'd slapped her. "I don't need your help with my business, Bella. I need the penthouse." Then came the family dinner invitations. Thinly veiled tribunals where I'd be seated at the center of the table while relatives I barely knew questioned my decision. "Don't you want to be part of this family?" Great Aunt Cordelia had asked at one such dinner, her ancient hands trembling around her wine glass. "Of course I do," I'd answered truthfully. Connection was all I'd ever wanted from them. "Then prove it," Uncle Charles would interject. "Actions speak louder than words, Bella." The subtext was clear. My place in the family was conditional. The price of admission was my inheritance. One rainy afternoon, I returned to my apartment to find Uncle Charles and a woman in a sharp suit waiting in the lobby. "This is Patricia Lane, the best realtor in Los Angeles," he said, not bothering with pleasantries. "She's going to walk you through the selling process for the penthouse. We've already lined up 3 potential buyers." The audacity stole my breath. "I never agreed to sell." Patricia smiled thinly. "Your uncle indicated you were motivated. The market is excellent right now. We should move quickly." "There's been a misunderstanding," I said firmly. "I'm not selling. Uncle Charles's mask of civility slipped. Don't be difficult, Bella. This isn't a game. Olivia has meetings with major investors next month. They need to see the right image. My inheritance isn't Olivia's prop, I replied, anger finally breaking through my usual reserve. His face hardened. You've never understood how this family works. We support each other's success. We make sacrifices. Seems like I'm the only one expected to sacrifice. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Listen carefully. If you don't sell that penthouse, you're cut off. No more family events, no more connections, no more safety net. Is that what you want? To be completely alone? The threat hung between us, and for a moment, fear clawed at my chest. The Monroes were manipulative and cold, but they were the only family I had. Could I really walk away from them completely? I need to think, I whispered. Don't think too long, he warned, steering Patricia toward the exit. Opportunity doesn't wait forever. Neither does family. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my small apartment, Grandma's letter clutched in my hand. The penthouse was mine. Legally, morally, emotionally. But was it worth losing my family over? I called my closest friend Zoe at midnight. They're trying to bully you, she said flatly after I poured out the whole story. Classic emotional manipulation. But what if they're right? I asked. What if I'm being selfish? The penthouse is huge. I don't need all that space. Stop, Zoe interrupted. Ask yourself, if the situation were reversed, would Olivia give up her inheritance for you? We both knew the answer. You know what's crazy? I said quietly. Part of me still wants their approval. Isn't that pathetic? After everything? It's human, Zoe replied gently. But Bella, these people see your kindness as weakness. They'll take everything if you let them. The next morning, I woke to a text from Olivia. Mom and Dad say you're being stubborn. Don't you care about my future at all? Family is supposed to support each other's dreams. I stared at the message, noticing for the first time how one-sided their definition of support was. When was the last time any of them had supported my dreams? That afternoon, I decided to visit the penthouse again. I needed to connect with what Grandma had seen in me, why she'd chosen me for this inheritance. The penthouse felt different in daylight, less intimidating, more welcoming. Sunlight streamed through the floor to ceiling, windows, painting warm rectangles on the marble floors. I wandered through each room, running my fingers along surfaces, opening closets, studying the view from different angles. In the master bedroom, I found a hidden door behind a bookcase, a small study I'd never noticed as a child. Inside was a desk, shelves of books, and a collection of photo albums. I opened one to find pictures of Grandma as a young woman, before the money, before the Monroe name became synonymous with Los Angeles high society. There she was, standing proudly in front of a tiny apartment building. Another photo showed her at a desk, pencil behind her ear, ledgers spread before her. My heart jumped. She'd been an accountant, too. I'd never known. A journal sat on the desk. Inside, in Grandma's handwriting, was the history. I'd never been told. How she'd started as a bookkeeper during a time when women rarely worked in finance. How she'd saved every penny, invested wisely, bought that first small apartment building. How she'd built her own fortune before she ever met Grandpa Monroe. The family mythology, that Grandpa had been the financial genius, was a convenient fiction. Eleanor had been the business mind, the strategic thinker who'd transformed good money into great wealth. Charles never understood, she'd written. He sees money as power over others. He never learned that true wealth is the freedom to live authentically. Something shifted in me as I sat in that hidden room. The penthouse wasn't just a property. It was Grandma's testament to self-made success, to quiet dignity over flashy display. She hadn't chosen me on a whim. She'd recognized something in me that the others lacked. My phone rang. Uncle Charles again. We need your answer, Bella. The realtor has a buyer ready to move. I took a deep breath, looking out at the Los Angeles skyline, a city built by people who refuse to be defined by others. The answer is no, Uncle Charles. I'm not selling. His silence was brief but icy. Then consider yourself no longer part of this family. The call ended, and I should have felt devastated. Instead, sitting in my grandmother's secret study, surrounded by the evidence of her true legacy, I felt something unexpected. Relief. The next day, the Real Pressure campaign began. The Monroe family's campaign intensified from pressure to persecution. Within a week of my refusal to sell, the whispers began, Distant relatives called with concerns. Family friends stopped me in coffee shops to ask if I was doing okay emotionally. Carefully crafted rumors painted me as unstable, ungrateful, even unhinged. I heard she's living like a squatter in that beautiful penthouse. One of Aunt Margaret's friends stage whispered at a charity luncheon I'd been invited to before they realized I was in earshot. Such a shame. All that luxury wasted on someone who doesn't appreciate fine things. I kept my head high and walked past them, but their laughter followed me out the door. The family's tactics grew more aggressive. Anonymous complaints were filed with my building's management about unauthorized renovations I'd never made. My mailbox overflowed with real estate brochures. Olivia's fiancé, a corporate lawyer with suspicious connections, suggested my tax returns might face extra scrutiny this year. "Just looking out for you," he'd said with a smile that never reached his eyes. Sudden windfalls often trigger audits. The threat was clear. They would make owning the penthouse as difficult as possible. Through it all, I continued my quiet life. I went to work, paid my bills, and spent weekends exploring my new home. The penthouse began to feel less like Grandma's museum and more like my sanctuary. I moved my books into the library, replaced some of the more ostentatious artwork with pieces I loved, and converted one of the 5 bedrooms into a home office. One evening, as I sat on the balcony watching the sunset paint the city gold, my phone lit up with Olivia's name. "We need to talk," she said, her voice missing its usual sharp edge. "Not at the mansion. Somewhere neutral." We met at a small cafe the next day. Olivia looked uncharacteristically subdued in jeans and a simple blouse. Her relatable costume, I realized, for when she wanted something. "Mom and Dad don't know I'm here," she began, stirring her latte nervously. "They'd be furious." "Why are you here then?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Because I need you to understand what's at stake." She leaned forward. "My startup isn't just another project, Bella. It's everything. I've got investors ready to commit millions, but they need to see that I have the right presence. And the penthouse is that presence?" "Exactly." Her eyes lit up, mistaking my question for understanding. "These people invest in the person as much as the business. They need to see that I belong in their world. And I don't," I said softly. Olivia had the grace to look uncomfortable. "That's not... you've chosen a different path. There's nothing wrong with that. But this is my one chance to prove myself." "To who? Your parents? These investors?" "To everyone." Passion crept into her voice. "Do you know what it's like being the Monroe heir? The expectations? Dad's been grooming me since I was in kindergarten to take over, to be exceptional. Nothing I do is ever enough." For a moment, I glimpsed the weight she carried. A different kind of burden than mine, but heavy nonetheless. Then she continued, and the moment shattered. "If I don't make this work, Dad says I'll have, to take a real position at Monroe Holdings. Corporate drudgery for the rest of my life." She shuddered dramatically. "I'd rather die." My sympathy evaporated. Corporate drudgery was my daily reality, one she considered a fate worse than death. "What exactly is this startup?" I asked, realizing I'd never heard specifics. "It's a luxury lifestyle subscription service," she said, brightening. "Curated experiences for the elite, exclusive access to events, properties, services, a membership to a better life. And your target market? People who want to experience true luxury without the old money gatekeeping, new money who need guidance, aspirational types. People like me," I realized. People the Monroes considered outsiders. The penthouse would be perfect for launch events. Networking parties, photo shoots," she continued. "Imagine the Instagram possibilities. We could easily get $2 million in first-round funding." "We," I repeated. She reached across the table, taking my hand in a rare gesture of connection. "I could make you part of it, Bella. A small equity stake. You'd finally be included in the family business." The offer dangled before me. Acceptance, inclusion, belonging. Everything I'd craved from them for years. All I had to do was hand over my inheritance. "I need to think about it," I said, withdrawing my hand. Olivia's face hardened slightly. "Don't take too long. Dad's patience is running out." That night, I lay awake in the penthouse master bedroom, turning the conversation over in my mind. Part of me, the little girl who'd been excluded. From family photos, forgotten at school events, treated as an afterthought, desperately wanted to say yes, to finally be a real Monroe. But another part, the part that had built a life on my own terms, that had connected with Grandma's true legacy, knew this was just another transaction. They weren't offering love or respect. They were offering a business deal wrapped in family obligation. My phone buzzed with a text from Uncle Charles. Olivia tells me you're considering our proposal. Smart girl. We'll draw up the paperwork tomorrow. Before I could respond, another text. The family's annual fall gala is next month. Cooperate, and you'll receive an invitation. It's time you were properly introduced to society. The gala, the crown jewel of the Monroe social calendar. I'd never been invited. Before, always told it was just for immediate family and close friends, a category that somehow never included me. Now they were dangling it like a prize for good behavior. Something broke inside me. Not in a way that hurt, but in a way that clarified. Like a fever breaking, leaving clarity in its wake. I walked to the window looking out at the city lights. Los Angeles sprawled before me. A city where people reinvented themselves daily, where new beginnings were the currency of hope. No more, I whispered to my reflection in the glass. No more begging for scraps from their table. I typed a response to Uncle Charles. I've made my decision. The penthouse stays with me. It's time we all accepted that. His reply came instantly. You've made your choice. Don't expect another chance. I turned off my phone and slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. The next morning, I woke to pounding on my door. I opened it to find Aunt Margaret, her face flushed with anger. How dare you? She hissed, pushing past me into the foyer. After everything we've done for you. I don't recall you doing anything for me, I said calmly, closing the door. She stalked into the living room, her gaze sweeping critically over the changes I'd made. Look at what you've done to this place. Eleanor would be horrified. Grandma left it to me because she knew I'd make it my own. She left it to you because she was going senile, Aunt Margaret snapped. She didn't know what she was doing. The casual cruelty stunned me. I think you should leave. Not until you listen to reason. Charles is prepared to cut you off completely. No family connections, no social introductions, nothing. You'll be utterly alone. I looked at my aunt, really looked at her. The perfect hair, the designer clothes, the face tight from too many procedures. All that effort to maintain an image, and for what? To belong to a world built on appearances? I'm already alone, I said quietly. I always have been in this family. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Or memory. For a moment, I thought she might soften, might acknowledge the truth of my words. Instead, she straightened her shoulders. You have until the end of the week to reconsider. After that, you're dead to us. After she left, I sat alone in the grand living room, letting her words settle around me, dead to them, as if I'd ever been truly alive in their eyes. My phone rang, an unfamiliar number. Ms. Monroe? A deep voice inquired. My name is Ethan Beaumont. I wonder if we might meet to discuss a business proposition regarding your property. The restaurant Ethan Beaumont suggested was understated but exclusive, the kind of place that didn't advertise, relying instead on whispered recommendations among the truly wealthy. No flashy logos or celebrity sightings, just impeccable service and absolute privacy. He stood when I approached the table, tall, with dark hair touched by silver at the temples. His suit was beautifully tailored but not ostentatious. Old money, I thought immediately, the kind that doesn't need to show off. Ms. Monroe, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Call me Bella. Please, I replied, taking the offered seat. Though I'm curious how you found me. And why? He smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. I've had my eye on the Archer for years. It's one of the few buildings in Los Angeles with the privacy and security my company requires. When I heard the penthouse might be available, I made inquiries. It's not for sale, I said automatically. So, I've been told, he acknowledged, nodding to the waiter who poured water into our glasses. Repeatedly, by several brokers claiming to represent you. I frowned. I haven't authorized any brokers. I suspected as much. Which is why I tracked down your work address rather than going through your family. The way he hesitated before saying family told me he knew more than he was letting on. What exactly do you want, Mr. Beaumont? Ethan, please. He leaned back, studying me. I run Beaumont Capital. We invest in technologies that solve real problems, not trendy apps or vapid social platforms, but innovations that matter. I knew of Beaumont Capital. They were respected, successful, and notoriously selective about their investments. We're establishing a West Coast headquarters, he continued. I've been searching for the right location for months. The Archer has everything we need: central location, top-tier security, and the right image for our clients. And you want the penthouse, I concluded. I want to propose an arrangement that might benefit us both. He pulled out a slim folder. I understand your family is pressuring you to sell to fund your cousin's venture. My eyes narrowed. You seem well informed about my personal affairs. Los Angeles is a small town in certain circles, he replied diplomatically. And your uncle has been rather vocal about securing my investment in your cousin's startup. He's mentioned the penthouse situation multiple times. Of course he had. Uncle Charles never missed an opportunity to network. So what's this arrangement you're proposing? Ethan slid the folder toward me. Beaumont Capital would purchase the penthouse at 20% above market value. I started to protest, but he held up a hand. Please, hear me out. The building would be reconfigured. The main space would become our executive offices and client meeting areas. But, he tapped the folder, we would convert the East Wing into a private residence. Your private residence with its own entrance secured against the main space. You would have a lifetime lease at a nominal rate of $1 per year. I stared at him, trying to process the offer. Why would you do that? Because I respect your grandmother, he said simply. Eleanor Monroe was a remarkable businesswoman. Few people know that she was one of my first investors when I started Beaumont Capital 15 years ago. She believed in my vision when others called it impractical. You knew Grandma? I whispered. He nodded. She spoke of you often. She was concerned about how you were treated by the family. This solution would honor her wishes while giving both of us what we need. I opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. The offer was genuine, generous even. I would receive several $1 million while still keeping a portion of the penthouse as my home. What about Olivia's startup? I asked. My uncle seems determined to secure your investment. Ethan's expression cooled. I've reviewed her business plan. It's not viable. A luxury lifestyle subscription service with no unique value proposition? The market is saturated with such ventures. So you've been stringing them along? I couldn't hide my surprise. I've been evaluating all my options, he corrected gently, including this one, which I find far more appealing. I closed the folder. I need time to think. Of course. But I should mention, he hesitated, this offer would need to remain confidential until the transaction is complete. If word gets out prematurely, certain parties might attempt to interfere. Certain parties? My family? How confidential? Entirely. Not even my full board knows the details yet. Just you, me, and the necessary legal team who are bound by strict NDAs. I thought of Uncle Charles's ultimatum, of Aunt Margaret's threat, of Olivia's manipulative pleas, of years of being the family outsider. If I agree, when would this happen? We could close within 2 weeks, he said. The renovations would take another month. You'd need temporary accommodations during that time, but we'd cover those costs, of course. And after that, what happens when my family finds out? Ethan's smile returned, a glint of something almost mischievous in his eyes. That depends. How much do you want them to know? And when? I felt a matching smile spread across my face. I believe in transparency, eventually. The Davenport Society charity ball is next month, he said casually. I'm a regular donor. I understand your family will be in attendance? They always are. I never am. Perhaps this year should be different. He extended his hand across the table. Do we have an agreement, Bella? I thought of Grandma's letter. The penthouse is yours. Not to prove anything. To them, but to give you the freedom they never wanted you to have. I took his hand. We do. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of confidential meetings, document signings, and strategic planning. My family, interpreting my silence as wavering, eased their pressure campaign. Uncle Charles even called with what passed for warmth in his voice. I hear you've been considering our proposal more. Seriously, he said. That's my girl. Always knew you'd make the right decision. I'm still thinking, I replied noncommittally. Well, don't think too long. The fall gala is approaching, and we'd love to include you this year. Olivia has been asking about you. I bit back a laugh at the transparent manipulation. Has she? Family is everything, Bella, he said solemnly. Remember that. Meanwhile, Ethan and I finalized our arrangement. The sale closed quietly, funds were transferred to my account, and renovation plans were approved. I moved into a luxury short-term rental while work began on creating my private residence within the penthouse. Ethan proved to be everything my family was not. Straightforward, respectful, and true to his word. When he learned I was using some of the Proceeds to establish a scholarship fund for accounting students, he matched my contribution without hesitation. Eleanor would approve, was all he said. As the date of the Davenport Society charity ball approached, I received an official invitation, the first I'd ever gotten. Uncle Charles called the same day. "We thought it was time you were properly introduced to society," he said, magnanimously. "Wear something appropriate. Margaret can take you shopping if necessary." "I can manage," I assured him. "And Bella?" "Ethan Beaumont will be there. He's been very interested in Olivia's business lately. A good word from family would go a long way." I smiled into the phone. "I'll be sure to speak with him." The night of the gala arrived. I chose my dress carefully, a midnight blue, gown that was elegant without being flashy, and had a team of professionals help with my hair and makeup. For once, I wanted to look the part of a Monroe. Not to impress them, but to ensure they recognized me when the moment came. At precisely 8 o'clock, I stepped out of my car at the Beverly Wilshire Hotel. The grand ballroom beckoned ahead, chandeliers glittering like constellations above. The city's elite. I took a deep breath and walked toward the future Grandma had secured for me, one where I would never again need to beg for a place at the table. The Davenport Society charity ball was everything I'd imagined from years of exclusion. Crystal chandeliers dripping from coffered ceilings, champagne flowing from fountains, Los Angeles royalty draped in diamonds and designer gowns. A string quartet played in one corner while waiters glided through the crowd with silver trays. I paused at the entrance, allowing myself a moment to absorb the spectacle. This was the world my family had kept from me, the glittering summit of their social mountain. Tonight, for the first time, I'd been permitted to ascend. "Bella Monroe," the announcer called, his voice ringing across the ballroom. Heads turned. Conversations paused. For a heartbeat, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. I was an unexpected variable in their carefully curated equation. I descended the marble staircase, conscious of the eyes tracking my progress. Among the sea of faces, I spotted Uncle Charles near the bar, Aunt Margaret beside the silent auction table, and Olivia holding court with a group of young socialites. Their expressions shifted from surprise to calculation as they assessed my appearance, my confidence, my very presence in their sacred space. Uncle Charles reached me first, martini in hand. "Bella," he said, air kissing my cheek. "You clean up nicely." "Thank you for the invitation," I replied evenly. "It's quite an event. The Davenport Ball raises millions for children's charities," he said, as if I hadn't known this my entire life. "The guest list is very exclusive." I gathered as much, since this is my first invitation in 28 years. He chuckled, the sound hollow. "You always did have a peculiar sense of humor. Come, there are people you should meet." The next hour was a carousel of introductions, each more transparent than the last. Uncle Charles paraded me before potential investors for Olivia's startup, carefully framing me as the family's bookkeeper. Keeps all our finances in order, such a detail person, never once acknowledging my professional credentials or independent career. Aunt Margaret joined the campaign, her arm linked possessively through mine as she steered me toward a silver-haired couple. "Victoria, Harrison, this is our Bella," she cooed. "She's recently come into some property. We're helping her manage it, of course. Such a responsibility for someone so inexperienced." I smiled tightly. "The penthouse at the Archer. It was my grandmother's." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "Eleanor's penthouse? How lovely. We attended many wonderful gatherings there." "You must continue the tradition," Harrison added. "Those walls were made for entertaining." "Actually," Aunt Margaret interjected smoothly, "the family has plans for that property. More suitable arrangements are being made for Bella." I extricated my arm from her grip. "If you'll excuse me, I see someone I need to greet." I retreated to the edge of the ballroom, taking a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. From this vantage point, I could observe the Monroe machine in action. Uncle Charles working the room with practiced charm, Aunt Margaret whispering into carefully selected ears, and Olivia, resplendent in a crimson gown, gesturing animatedly as she pitched her vision to anyone who would listen. They moved through the crowd like sharks through water, purposeful, predatory, perpetually in motion. Had I ever truly wanted to be one of them? The thought seemed absurd now. "They're rather obvious, aren't they?" a voice said beside me. I turned to find a woman about my age, elegant in a simple black dress. Her expression was amused. "I'm sorry?" "The Monroes," she clarified. "Always working an angle. I went to school with Olivia. She hasn't changed a bit." Still selling dreams without substance. I hesitated, uncertain whether this was a trap or genuine commiseration. I'm Mia Chen, she continued, extending her hand. Venture capital. I turned down Olivia's pitch last week. Bella Monroe, I said, shaking her hand. The family disappointment. Mia laughed, a genuine sound that drew surprised glances from nearby guests. I've heard. The accountant who won't play by the rules. I like you already. We chatted easily, discovering shared interests and compatible worldviews. Mia had built her career from scratch, climbing from intern to partner at her firm through intelligence and grit. No family connections, no shortcuts. I found myself relaxing for the first time that evening. Your uncle's been telling everyone that Ethan Beaumont is about to invest in Olivia's startup, Mia mentioned casually. Is that true? Before I could answer, a hush fell over the ballroom. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and through the opening walked Ethan Beaumont himself, impeccably dressed in a tuxedo, his presence commanding attention without effort. Uncle Charles immediately broke away from his conversation, moving toward Ethan with the eagerness of a courtier approaching royalty. Aunt Margaret nudged Olivia forward, adjusting a strand of her hair before sending her into Ethan's path. Watch this, Mia murmured, the Monroe ambush in action. I observed as my family converged on Ethan from multiple angles, their movements choreographed with the precision of predators who had hunted together for decades. Olivia reached him first, her smile dazzling as she extended her hand. Uncle Charles approached from the side, ready to reinforce whatever pitch Olivia was making. But Ethan surprised them all. After a brief acknowledgement, a handshake, a few words, he continued scanning the room. When his eyes met mine, he smiled and began walking directly toward me, ignoring the Monroe's attempts to recapture his attention. Bella, he said warmly, taking my hand. You look stunning. Thank you, I replied, conscious of the sudden silence around us. Ethan, this is Mia Chen. He greeted Mia with genuine interest, asking intelligent questions about her work. The three of us conversed easily, while from the corner of my eye I saw Uncle Charles and Aunt Margaret exchanging concerned glances. Olivia's face had hardened into a mask of suspicion. They converged on us within minutes. Ethan, Uncle Charles boomed, I see you've, found our Bella. We were just telling the Harringtons about her new property. Such a windfall for her. The penthouse at the Archer? Ethan said smoothly. Yes, it's an exceptional property. Olivia has been sharing her exciting plans. Aunt Margaret interjected, drawing her daughter forward. I believe you two were discussing potential collaborations. Ethan's expression remained pleasant, but neutral. We've had preliminary conversations. More than preliminary, Olivia insisted, her voice pitched to Carrie. Ethan's team has been very responsive to our proposal. The synergy between Beaumont Capital and my luxury lifestyle platform is obvious to everyone. The circle around us had widened as guests sensed the potential for drama, the lifeblood of any society event. I caught fragments of whispers, Monroe girl, inheritance, startup funding. Ethan checked his watch. Speaking of the Archer, I should share some news. He nodded to a staff member near the entrance, who disappeared briefly before returning with a small velvet box. Uncle Charles stepped forward eagerly. An announcement. Excellent timing. The Davenport Ball is perfect for launching new ventures. In a manner of speaking, Ethan replied, accepting the box. He turned to face me directly. Bella, as you know, Beaumont Capital has been expanding its West Coast presence. My heart raced. This wasn't the plan. We'd agreed to a subtle revelation, not a public declaration before the entire Los Angeles elite. After months of searching, Ethan continued, we finally secured the perfect location for our new headquarters. He opened the box, revealing a set of gleaming keys. The penthouse at the Archer. The silence was absolute. Every eye in the ballroom fixed on us, on the keys, on my face, on the Monroe's frozen expressions. You purchased the penthouse? Uncle Charles finally managed, his voice strangled. The transaction closed last week, Ethan confirmed, handing me the keys. With Bella's full cooperation and consent. Olivia stepped forward, her composure slipping. That's impossible. Bella was selling it to fund my startup. That was the arrangement. There was no arrangement, I said quietly, finding my voice at last. The penthouse was mine to do with as I chose, and I chose this. Aunt Margaret's face had turned an alarming shade of white. You sold it? Without consulting. Family? Without considering Olivia's needs? I considered everyone's needs, I replied, including my own. Uncle Charles rallied, forcing a smile that resembled a grimace. Well, this is unexpected, but perhaps this works out for everyone. Ethan's investment in the property frees up capital for Bella to support Olivia's venture, as we discussed. I don't believe we discussed that, Ethan said, his tone cooling several degrees. In fact, after reviewing the business plan, I found Olivia's concept to be fundamentally unsound. The market is saturated, the financial projections are wildly optimistic, and frankly, the execution strategy lacks substance. The gathered crowd collectively inhaled. No one rejected a Monroe proposal so publicly. Olivia's face contorted with rage. You led me on for weeks. All those meetings, the feedback, the encouragement. I was being polite, Ethan replied calmly, and thorough in my assessment. This was her doing, Olivia hissed, pointing at me. She poisoned you against me. On the contrary, Ethan said. Bella never once disparaged your business. She didn't need to. The numbers spoke for themselves. The Davenport Society charity ball continued around us, but for the Monroe family, the evening had effectively ended. Uncle Charles retreated to the bar, downing scotch with mechanical precision. Aunt Margaret made a show of migraine symptoms, allowing her to sit with her eyes closed, avoiding the pitying glances from her social circle. Olivia simply disappeared, leaving only the echo of her humiliation hanging in the air. I remained, accepting congratulations from strangers who suddenly found me fascinating. Ethan stayed by my side, his presence both shield and statement. That was not exactly subtle, I murmured as we moved toward the terrace for a moment of quiet. I considered our options, he replied, guiding me through the French doors into the cool night air. A public declaration removes any possibility of your family twisting the narrative later. Everyone who matters in Los Angeles now knows exactly what happened. And what they don't know, his eyes crinkled with amusement, that you're still keeping part of the penthouse? That's between us and our legal team. The official story is that Beaumont Capital acquired the property for our headquarters, which is true. They'll never forgive me, said, looking out over the city lights. Do you want their forgiveness? I considered the question seriously. No, but I didn't want their hatred either. That's not hatred, Ethan said gently. It's wounded pride. There's a difference. We were interrupted by Mia, who slipped onto the terrace with 2 champagne flutes. You two certainly know how to liven up a charity ball, she said, handing us each a glass. The Davenport Society hasn't seen this much drama since the Hendersons' divorce announcement in '08. I didn't intend to create a scene, I said. Mia clinked her glass against mine. Sometimes scenes are necessary. Your family has been spinning their own version of reality for years. They needed a public fact check. We chatted easily, the 3 of us forming an impromptu alliance of outsiders who had earned their places in this rarefied world. As the evening progressed, other guests drifted to our corner, people curious about the woman who had defied the Monroes, who had partnered with Ethan Beaumont, who had suddenly become interesting in her own right. For the first time, I was seen not as an extension of the Monroe family, but as Bella, an individual with agency and value. Near midnight, as the ball was winding down, Uncle Charles approached our group. His usual polish had frayed around the edges, his bow tie slightly askew. A word, Bella, he said, attempting his authoritative tone despite the slight slur in his voice. Privately, I excused myself and followed him to a quiet corner of the terrace. The city sprawled before us, a carpet of light stretching to the horizon. For a moment, he simply stared out at the view, gathering his thoughts. You humiliated this family tonight, he finally said. That wasn't my intention. Wasn't it? He turned to face me, his expression hard. You orchestrated this entire scenario, keeping the sale secret, arranging the public announcement, blindsiding us in front of everyone who matters. The way you blindsided me with realtors at my apartment, with ultimatums and threats to cut me off. I kept my voice calm. I simply made a business decision that worked for me. This wasn't business, this was betrayal. He jabbed a finger toward the ballroom. You've embarrassed Olivia beyond repair. Her investors were here tonight. They witnessed everything. If her business was viable, one public moment wouldn't derail it. You never understood how things work, he said, his voice rising. Perception is reality in our world. Connections and impressions determine success. You've destroyed years of careful positioning. Maybe it's time for something real instead of carefully curated perceptions, I suggested. Grandma built her fortune on substance, not appearances. He scoffed. Eleanor was from a different era. The rules have changed. Have they? Because Ethan knew Grandma. He respected her approach to business. That's why he was willing to work with me, because I reminded him of her integrity. Uncle Charles's face flushed deeper. You think you're clever, don't you? One business deal and suddenly you're playing in the big leagues. But you've made a powerful enemy tonight. The Monroes. Don't forget betrayal. I studied my uncle, this man who had loomed so large in my life, whose approval I had sought for decades. In the moonlight, I could see the truth. He was smaller than I had imagined. His power existed only because others granted it to him. I'm not your enemy, Uncle Charles. I never was. I was just never your priority either. You want to talk about priorities? He hissed. You chose a stranger over your own blood. You chose money over family loyalty. I chose myself, I corrected quietly, maybe for the first time ever. Well, congratulations, he said bitterly. You got what you wanted. But remember this, you're on your own now, completely. When things go wrong, and they will, don't come crawling back to us. I won't, I promised. He straightened his jacket, attempting to reclaim his dignity. The Monroe name opens doors in this town. You've just closed all of them behind you. Perhaps, but I've found my own keys. I smiled, thinking of the velvet box, of the penthouse, of my newfound freedom. Uncle Charles turned away without another word, disappearing back into the ballroom where Aunt Margaret waited by the exit, her face a mask of barely contained fury. I remained on the terrace, breathing in the night air. The weight I'd carried for years, the desire to belong, to be accepted by people who would never truly see me, had lifted. In its place was something unfamiliar, but welcome. Peace. Ethan joined me a few minutes later, 2 fresh glasses of champagne in hand. Family conversation? Final conversation, I think, I replied, accepting the glass. Are you all right? I considered the question. Better than all right, actually. For the first time, I feel free. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Freedom can be disorienting at first. When you've lived your life according to others' expectations, suddenly having none can feel like falling. Or flying, I suggested. Indeed. He raised his glass. To new beginnings. We clinked glasses and fell into comfortable silence, watching the party wind down through the windows. The Monroes had already departed, leaving a vacuum that the remaining guests seemed relieved to fill with fresh gossip and speculation. What happens tomorrow? I asked. When the ballroom is empty and real life resumes? The renovations at the Archer continue, Ethan said practically. Beaumont Capital moves in next month. You take possession of your private residence. Life goes on, but on different terms. And my family? They'll regroup, revise their narrative. People like your uncle always do. He turned to face me directly. The question is, what will you do with your freedom? It was a profound question, one I hadn't fully considered in the whirlwind of recent events. What did I want now? That I was no longer defined by my relationship to the Monroes? I don't know yet, I admitted, but I'm looking forward to figuring it out. As the evening came to a close, Mia approached with an unexpected proposition. My firm is looking for a financial analyst with actual accounting experience, she said. Someone who understands numbers beyond spreadsheet projections. Someone who can spot substance beneath the flash. Interested? Seriously? I asked, surprised. Deadly serious. What you did tonight showed backbone. We need more of that in venture capital. She handed me her card. Call me Monday. After she left, Ethan smiled. The universe has a way of opening doors when you close the right ones. We walked together through the now quiet ballroom, past the remnants of the evening's spectacle. Staff were already dismantling decorations, clearing tables, restoring order to chaos. Need a ride home? Ethan offered as we reached the entrance. I shook my head. I have a car waiting. But thank you. For everything. This is just the beginning, Bella, he said, his voice warm. Your grandmother would be proud. As my car pulled away from the Beverly Wilshire, I looked back at the glittering hotel, the fortress of privilege I had finally breached, only to discover it wasn't the citadel I'd imagined. It was just a building filled with people, some genuine, many not. My phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. I hope you're happy. You've ruined everything. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The Monroes had made their position clear, and I had made my choice. Whatever came next would be on my terms. For the first time in my life, that thought filled me not with anxiety, but with anticipation. 3 months after the Davenport Society ball, Los Angeles was abuzz with two contrasting narratives. The first, whispered in country club locker rooms and behind manicured hedges, told of the Monroe family's stunning fall from grace. Olivia's startup had collapsed before launch when her remaining investors withdrew after witnessing her public humiliation. Uncle Charles had been quietly removed from 3 prestigious boards when questions about Monroe Holdings' finances emerged. Questions that might never have been asked if he hadn't made so many enemies with his arrogance. Aunt Margaret had retreated to their Palm Springs estate, citing exhaustion, though rumors suggested she was avoiding the social circuit after too many former friends had declined her invitations. The second narrative, discussed in boardrooms and business journals, centered on Beaumont Capital's innovative new headquarters at the Archer and their rising star financial analyst, me. I had accepted Mia's job offer the Monday after the ball. Within weeks, I discovered my true calling wasn't just in reviewing numbers, but in evaluating the people behind them. Years of observing my family's manipulations had gifted me with an uncanny ability to detect authenticity, or its absence, in entrepreneurs seeking funding. My analytical skills combined with this emotional intelligence made me unexpectedly valuable in venture capital. You've saved us from at least 3 beautiful disasters, Mia told me one evening as we reviewed potential investments. Pretty pitch decks with empty foundations. Exactly the kind of businesses your cousin would have created. I smiled at the comparison, but felt no satisfaction in Olivia's downfall. Despite everything, she was still family. Her pain brought me no joy, only a quiet sadness for what might have been if the Monroes had valued substance over appearance. My new life settled into a rhythm I'd never imagined possible. The renovations at the Archer had transformed the penthouse into 2 distinct spaces. Beaumont Capital occupied the main area, converted into elegant offices and meeting rooms that balanced luxury with purpose. My private residence, the East Wing with its separate entrance and security system, had become my sanctuary. Smaller than the original penthouse, but infinitely more mine, every corner reflected my preferences, not the expectations of others. Ethan had become a steady presence in my life, first as a business ally, then as a friend, and gradually, something more. We shared dinners on my private terrace, discussing everything from investment strategies to childhood memories. Unlike the Monroes, he listened when I spoke, valued my perspectives, and never made me feel small to elevate himself. "You've changed," he observed one evening as we watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Not fundamentally. You were always this person, but you carry yourself differently now." "How so?" I asked, curious about his perception. "You take up space unapologetically," he said. "You speak with certainty. You've stopped qualifying your opinions or shrinking to make others comfortable." I considered his words. "I guess I've stopped waiting for permission to exist." "Exactly that," he agreed, his eyes warm with something beyond professional admiration. That night, when he kissed me goodnight at my door, neither of us pretended it was just a friendly gesture. Something was shifting between us, something real and unhurried, built on mutual respect rather than convenience or advantage. The following week, as fall gave way to winter, I received an unexpected letter. The elegant script on the envelope was instantly recognizable, Aunt Margaret's distinctive handwriting. I hesitated before opening it, bracing for accusations or manipulation. Instead, I found something entirely unexpected. "Bella, they say pride comes before a fall." I never understood that phrase until recently. "Charles doesn't know I'm writing to you. He remains convinced that you orchestrated our public humiliation deliberately. Perhaps you did. If so, it was a lesson long overdue. I find myself thinking about Eleanor lately. Her quiet strength, her certainty. You remind me of her more than anyone else in the family, though I was too blind to see it before. She would be proud of how you've handled yourself. I won't ask for forgiveness. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. But I wanted you to know that I recognize my part in alienating you from this family. It was wrong, and I am sorry. Margaret." I read the letter twice, searching for hidden agendas or subtle manipulations. Finding none, I placed it in my desk drawer, uncertain how to respond, or whether I should respond at all. It wasn't quite an olive branch, but it was an acknowledgement, perhaps the first genuine interaction I'd ever had with my aunt. 2 days later, while leaving my office, I literally collided with Olivia in the lobby of Mia's building. She looked different, thinner, less polished, but somehow more real than I'd ever seen her. "Bella," she said, clearly as surprised as I was, "I didn't know you worked here." For a few months now, I replied, noting the portfolio clutched in her hands. Are you meeting with someone? She nodded, a flush creeping up her neck. Mia Chen. Informational interview. I'm, starting over. New business concept. The awkwardness between us was palpable. Months of unspoken accusations and resentments hovering in the air. Is it another lifestyle venture? I asked, genuinely curious. No. She shook her head. Something with actual substance. A platform connecting small ethical manufacturers with retailers. Transparent supply chains, fair labor practices. She hesitated. Dad hates it. Says it's too niche, too political. Not glamorous enough. And what do you think? I think... She took a deep breath. I think I'm done trying to impress people who are never satisfied. I want to build something that matters, even if it doesn't look good on Instagram. For a moment, I glimpsed the person Olivia might have become without Uncle Charles's influence. Someone with passion and purpose beyond status seeking. That sounds promising, I said sincerely. Mia values integrity in founders. Be honest about your past failures and what you've learned. She respects growth more than perfection. Olivia studied me with new eyes. Why are you helping me? After everything? I considered the question carefully. Because holding grudges requires energy I'd rather invest elsewhere. And because we're still family, even if we're not close. We never gave you a chance to be close, she admitted quietly. I'm sorry for that. The apology was unexpected, a small crack in the Monroe facade I'd never thought I'd see. Good luck with your meeting, I said, stepping aside. I mean that. She nodded, squaring her shoulders before walking toward the elevators. I watched her go, wondering if this was the beginning of her own transformation. That evening, I recounted both encounters to Ethan as we prepared dinner in my kitchen, a domestic scene that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. People can surprise you, he observed, chopping vegetables with practiced precision. Sometimes it takes a catastrophe to break entrenched patterns. Do you think they're genuine? The apologies, the changes? He considered the question seriously. Margaret, possibly. She's had time to reflect, and she has less ego than Charles. Olivia? He shrugged. The test will be whether she maintains this new direction when it gets difficult. Real change isn't a single decision. It's 1,000 small choices made day after day. Like building a new life, I murmured, thinking of my own journey over the past months. Exactly like that. He smiled, setting down, his knife to face me directly. Speaking of new directions, I've been meaning to ask you something. My heart quickened at his serious tone. What is it? Beaumont Capital is expanding, opening offices in Chicago, then New York. I'll be traveling more, overseeing the launches. He took my hand. I'd like you to come with me, not just as a colleague or a friend, but as my partner, in every sense. Are you asking me to move? I managed, trying to process his words. I'm asking you to build something with me, he clarified, professionally and personally. We make a good team, Bella. I think we could make an exceptional one. The offer hung between us. Not an ultimatum, but an invitation. A door opening to possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to imagine. I need to think about it, I said. Honestly, my independence means everything to me now. I've only just found my footing. I understand. His smile was genuine, without a trace of disappointment. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. In that moment, I realized how far I'd come from the woman who had sat silently at Monroe family dinners, desperate for scraps of approval. The woman who had apologized for existing. The woman who had believed she needed their validation to have value. That night, as we finished dinner and talked about everything and nothing, I felt a profound sense of rightness. Not because Ethan had offered me a future, but because whatever I decided, the choice would be truly mine. 1 year to the day after the Davenport Society Ball, I found myself back in the grand ballroom of the Beverly, Wilshire. The chandeliers still glittered overhead. The same string quartet played softly in the corner, and Los Angeles society still circulated in designer gowns and bespoke suits. But everything else had changed. This time, I wasn't an outsider granted conditional access. I was a co-chair of the event, having joined the Davenport Society board at Mia's recommendation. This time, when the she announcer called Bella Monroe, heads turned not in surprise but in recognition and respect. Ms. Monroe, the silent auction is exceeding projections, the event coordinator reported as I surveyed the room. Your idea to include tech experiences alongside traditional luxury items was inspired. We've already surpassed last year's total. I nodded, pleased but not surprised. My contribution had been simple. Recognize that wealth in Los Angeles was evolving. Old money and new could coexist and even complement each other when focused on common goals. Ethan materialized at my side, handsome in his tuxedo. Congressman Wilson wants to discuss potential education initiatives, he murmured. Shall I bring him over, or would you prefer a break first? Give me 10 minutes, I replied, squeezing his hand gratefully. Our partnership had deepened over the past year, evolving naturally into a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine affection. I had accepted his invitation to join Beaumont Capital's expansion, but on my own terms, maintaining my position with Mia's firm while serving as a special advisor to Ethan's new ventures. It was an unconventional arrangement that allowed me to preserve my independence while building something meaningful together. My gaze drifted across the ballroom, automatically searching for the Monroe contingent before I remembered they weren't here. Uncle Charles and Aunt Margaret had removed themselves from the Davenport Society, after scheduling conflicts prevented their attendance at 3 consecutive events. The real reason that they couldn't face the subtle snubs and whispered comments went unspoken, but understood. Bella! Mia approached, champagne in hand. The Wilson Foundation just doubled their pledge. Your influence, I presume. Collective effort, I corrected. Ethan made a compelling case. Mia smirked. You two are sickeningly effective together. It's almost unfair to the rest of us mere mortals. Before I could respond, I noticed a familiar figure entering the ballroom. Olivia, elegant in a simple black dress, stood hesitantly at the entrance. Beside her was a tall woman I didn't recognize, their hands clasped together in a gesture that suggested more than friendship. Excuse me, I said to Mia, making my way across the room. Olivia spotted me approaching and straightened her shoulders, a gesture so reminiscent of Aunt Margaret that I almost smiled. But her eyes held uncertainty rather than the entitlement I was accustomed to seeing there. Bella, she said formally. Beautiful event. Thank you for coming, I replied. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't, she admitted. But Emma convinced me it was time. She turned to the woman beside her. This is Emma Reyes, my partner, in business and everything else. Olivia speaks highly of you, Emma said, extending her hand. Your advice last year made a significant difference in how we approached our launch. The venture Olivia had pitched to Mia that day had indeed materialized, an ethical manufacturing platform that had gained modest but growing traction. Not a unicorn startup, not a status symbol, but something with actual substance and purpose. How are your parents? I asked, genuinely curious. Olivia's expression tightened slightly. Adjusting, slowly. Dad's health scare last month put things in perspective. He stepped back from day-to-day operations at Monroe Holdings. And Mom? She hesitated. Mom's actually been supportive, in her way. She's trying. I'm glad to hear that, I said sincerely. They ask about you. Sometimes, Olivia offered tentatively. Not directly, but I can tell they wonder how you're doing. You can tell them I'm well, I said after a moment. Very well. An awkward silence fell between us. Too much history, too many wounds still healing to pretend we could simply reset to normal family relations. Would you like to join our table? I finally asked. Ethan and I are hosting the Wilsons, and some others. There's room. Relief flooded Olivia's face. We'd like that. Thank you. As the evening progressed, I found myself in a surreal position, sharing a table with my cousin, engaged in civil conversation about business ethics and charitable initiatives. It wasn't forgiveness, exactly. It wasn't forgetting, but it was a beginning, perhaps. A recognition that people could change, that relationships could evolve, that the past didn't have to dictate the future. Later, as Ethan and I stepped onto the terrace for a moment of quiet, he wrapped his arm around my waist. Quite a full-circle moment, he observed. You and Olivia at the same table, voluntarily. Life is strange, I agreed, leaning into his warmth. A year ago, I was fighting for the right to exist on my own terms. Now you're thriving, he completed. On your terms. We stood in comfortable silence, watching the city lights. So much had changed in a year. I had changed, growing into the person Grandma Eleanor had always seen in me, the woman who valued substance over appearance, who collected moments rather than connections, who recognized that true wealth was the freedom to live authentically. I've been thinking, I said finally, about your Chicago expansion. Oh? His tone was carefully neutral, giving me space to continue. I'd like to be more involved, not just as an advisor, but as a partner, a full stakeholder. His eyes brightened with interest. What are you proposing? A new division, focused on social impact investing, backing founders like Olivia who are building businesses with purpose beyond profit. I turned to face him fully. I'd split my time between Los Angeles and Chicago, build something that bridges our approaches. You've given this serious thought, he noted. I have. It's time to stop reacting to the past and start building for the future. I smiled. Are you in? His answer was a kiss, gentle at first, then deepening with promise and possibility. When we returned to the ballroom, the gala was reaching its crescendo. The auction winners were being announced, champagne was flowing, and the energy of the room had elevated from polite society to genuine celebration. Olivia caught my eye across the table and raised her glass slightly. Not a toast, exactly, but an acknowledgement. I nodded in return, recognizing the gesture for what, it was. Not surrender, not forgetting, but a quiet signal that we might find a way forward. As the evening drew to a close, I slipped away to a quiet corner to call a special number I'd been saving for this very night. Beaumont Residence, answered the familiar voice of Mrs. Chen, the caretaker Ethan and I had hired for Grandma Eleanor's oldest friend, now living in the guest house on Ethan's estate. It's Bella, I said warmly. Is she awake? For you? Always. Hold on. A moment later, a frail but clear voice came on the line. Bella, dear, how was your big night? Wonderful, Miss Josephine. Everything we hoped. The children's hospital will be fully funded. Eleanor would be so proud, the old woman said, her voice catching slightly. Not just of the charity work, of you, of who you've become. Tears pricked at my eyes. I wish she could have seen it. Oh, she sees, Josephine assured me. And she always knew. That's why she left you the penthouse. Not because you needed rescuing, but because she knew you had the strength to use it wisely. After we said our goodbyes, I remained in my quiet corner, letting her words sink in. Grandma hadn't given me the penthouse as a safety net. She'd given it to me as a catalyst, knowing I had the potential to break free, to transform, to create a life of substance and meaning. The inheritance had never been about the property itself. It had been about the choice it represented, the power to determine my own path, to define success on my own terms, to build connections based on genuine respect rather than obligation or advantage. Ethan found me a few minutes later, concern in his eyes. Everything all right? Perfect, I assured him, taking his offered hand. I was just thinking about Grandma. What would she say about all this, do you think? He asked, gesturing to the glittering ballroom, the powerful people, the successful event we'd created. I smiled, remembering the letter, the secret study, the woman who had built her fortune on integrity and quiet determination. She'd say that the best inheritance isn't what's given to you. It's what you build with your own hands. As we walked back into the heart of the celebration, I felt Grandma Eleanor's presence, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a foundation beneath my feet. The penthouse had been a launching pad, not a destination. The true inheritance was the courage to stand tall in what was already mine. My values, my voice, my worth. They had wanted me to give up my inheritance to prove I belonged. But the truth was, I never needed their approval. I didn't need their status, their circles, or their permission. What I needed was to stand tall in what was already mine. And when I finally did, their empire of fake smiles shattered in one night. But from those broken pieces, something unexpected had emerged. The possibility of authentic connections. Not perfect, not unmarred by the past, but real. And in a world built on appearances, that was the rarest treasure of all.